All right, guys, my apologies for the very unprofessional way in which I'm going to talk you through this material, but my audio isn't working on Schoology and I can't stand trying to type this all out. It's too much. Okay, so I'm going to make a little YouTube video. Hopefully today, tomorrow, the audio will sort out and we can go back to normal. So what we are looking at today is kind of an introduction to sort of ATP before we move on to our next kind of chunk of topics, which is photosynthesis. Yay! All right, so the first thing we need to talk about is why energy matters. And hopefully it's kind of apparent and obvious to you guys that if the supply of energy to a cell fails, then that cell can't carry out various biological processes and ultimately the entire organism is going to die. So energy is essential for life in that way. Now, organisms can be classified according to how they get their energy. Sorry, I was just having a drink. I had a dry mouth. And they can either be autotrophic or heterotrophic. Again, these terms are hopefully quite familiar to you, but just to kind of clarify, autotrophs or autotrophic organisms make organic compounds from carbon dioxide, i.e. think photosynthesis. There are lots of different organisms that can carry out photosynthesis, so obviously plants, but some bacteria and some fungi. However, not necessarily all bacteria are going to carry out photosynthesis. There are some that are non-photosynthetic, and so they can kind of acquire their energy from other chemical reactions. And then you have the heterotrophs or the heterotrophic organisms, and these are the ones that generally eat plants or other organisms, i.e. us. So we consume food in order to get our energy. Now, kind of the big thing, the big important molecule in when we're talking about energy, as I said, is ATP. ATP stands for adenine triphosphate. Now, I've got kind of a rough sketch here. The actual molecular diagram is on page 4 of your textbook. Please have a look at it and make a note of it, because they might ask you to draw it in an exam, or they might give you, a multiple choice question where they've got 4 different diagrams and you've got to pick the right one. Okay, so please have a look at that and write it down. But obviously, adenine triphosphate, as the name might suggest, is made up of an adenine, 3 phosphates, these 3 P's at the end, and then in the middle we've got a ribose sugar. Okay, adenine and the ribose sugar should be familiar to you guys, the nucleotide of DNA. Okay, now energy has to be constantly available in an accessible form. It's no use if you're a cell having to wait an hour to get the energy that you needed for a reaction to carry out 3 hours ago. Okay, so you need to be able to get hold of it, you need to be able to do so instantaneously. And so it's believed that ATP is the universal energy supplier in cells. So in all of your cells, ATP is what's used to get that energy because it is instantaneous and because it is accessible. So when the energy is needed, the third phosphate bonds can be broken by a hydrolysis reaction. So the bond between that second and third P, second and third phosphate, is broken down by a hydrolysis reaction. Remember, hydrolysis is the addition of water. Okay, and that reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme ATPase, so it's sped up by that enzyme. And what essentially happens, what it results in, is a free inorganic phosphate group. So that third P, that third phosphate, is kind of left on its own free. ADP, adenine diphosphate. So exactly the same as the tri, but only with 2 P's, 2 phosphates, and a bit of energy. Now that bit of energy can be quantified. It is 34 kilojoules of energy released per mole of ATP hydrolyzed. However, as you guys will know, not necessarily all of that 34 kilojoules is going to be put to use in a useful way. Some of it will be lost as heat, and then the remainder will obviously be used for biological activities. We'll look at this in more detail, but just to give you guys some ideas of what those biological activities are, an example would be muscle contraction. Okay, now this reaction, ATP to ADP, is reversible. So ATP can be hydrolyzed into ADP. ADP can go through a condensation reaction to produce ATP. And this is how you produce more ATP for the cells. Okay, so it's still catalyzed by that enzyme ATPase. As I said to you guys, it's a condensation reaction and it's going to require energy. So the tri to the diphosphate direction releases energy, the di to the triphosphate direction needs energy. And that energy can come from a couple of different sources. The first of which is catabolic reactions, so think respiration. And then the second is through something called the electron transport chain. Okay, now this is really complicated and we're going to look at it in much more detail further down the line, okay? So for now, I'm going to kind of present a very simplified version of it. For now, the simplified version is all you need. Please don't stress about needing to know more details. When we get to that point, I promise I'll go through it with you. Okay, but the electron transport chain, I've taken this definition straight from your textbook, nothing fancier than that. It's a series of electron-carrying compounds along which electrons are transferred in a series of oxidation and reduction reactions, which drives the production of ATP. Okay, so if I go on to my next slide, I've got a little diagram here for you. Okay, some of this details you just have to accept as true for now, and we'll look at it, as I said, further on in the course. Okay, but somewhere along the line in the process of respiration, you guys just need to make peace with and accept that there are some hydrogen containing compounds. The specifics of what those compounds are and their names right now, don't worry about it. But there are some compounds that obviously contain some hydrogen in them. And 2 hydrogen atoms are taken away from each of those compounds. Okay, and those hydrogen atoms are passed on to this hydrogen carrier, which we also call an acceptor. Okay, so this is just a structure that's specifically there to accept and carry that hydrogen. And upon accepting that hydrogen, that carrier is reduced. All right, we now take the electrons from that hydrogen and we pass them along a series of electron carriers, which is called the electron transport chain. All right, now I've drawn 3. I've used my little boxes to represent them. That isn't the definite number. Okay, we will look at it in more detail. I've just got 3 boxes there because that's what fit on my page. Okay, so those electrons from the hydrogen are passed from the acceptor along this electron transport chain. And each individual electron carrier goes through a series of redox reactions. So when the individual carrier accepts or gets the electron, it is reduced. And when it passes on the electron to the next carrier, it is oxidized. Remember, oxidation is loss, reduction is gain of electrons. Okay? And so through these series of redox reactions, a small amount of energy is released with each redox reaction, so with each reduction and oxidization. And that small amount of energy is used to drive the production of ATP. It provides the energy needed for that condensation reaction of ADP to ATP. Basically, it's providing the energy to rebuild that 3rd phosphate bond, okay, because bond making requires energy. All right, so that was a really, really quick whistle-stop tour kind of introduction to ATP. Please let me know if you've got any questions. Don't spend too long stressing about this electron transfer chain. All right, we will look at it in more detail kind of further down the course when we've got a bit more knowledge about it, but I just kind of wanted to introduce the idea to you. Let me know if you've got any issues.